Hurricane Katrina made landfall 20 years ago this week, devastating New Orleans. More than 1,800 lives were lost and hundreds of thousands of families were forced to start over. Many came right here to our valley.
That's right, they did. And one of my former TV colleagues, Norfolk Scripps GM and news director Ed Reams, was a local New Orleans reporter at the time on the front lines of Katrina, and he witnessed the devastation firsthand. And tonight, he talks with me about covering one of our worst natural disasters 2 decades later. It was one of the darkest chapters in American history. Hurricane Katrina roaring into New Orleans with 175-mile-an-hour winds, walls of water swallowing neighborhoods, and families running for their lives.
That actually peeled off and exposed the tin roof.
Scripps' own Ed Reams was there as the storm began to hit New Orleans, reporting live for WDSU. He remembers the fear as the hurricane approached.
Because it was a Category 5, the surge that it pushed out ahead of it, the amount of water that was pushing out ahead of it, was going to impact the coastal region of Louisiana.
Reams was an eyewitness to one of the most catastrophic disasters this country has ever seen. I saw you on the front lines of Katrina. That must have been really hard to cover just because you were in the middle of a storm. And then to tell those stories, it was devastating what was happening. People were doing everything to save their properties, but also save their lives.
During the storm and prior to the storm, we were sent to the Superdome, the Louisiana Superdome, the home of the New Orleans Saints, where it was called the shelter of last resort.
Inside the Superdome, it was a humanitarian crisis. It was a shelter for thousands of evacuees during Hurricane Katrina. Ed had a firsthand account.
During our time in the Superdome, we saw the Superdome become battered by the storm. First, it was a lot of loud noises. There was kind of a film, not a film, but a roofing over the Superdome that was peeled off by the storm. And you could look up into the roof and see the sky, and rain and everything was pouring in. And so that's when we knew things were a little bit different with this storm.
Different and devastating. Ed says with flood walls and levees damaged, New Orleans was filling up with water.
The reason why people were in the Superdome for so long was, you know, the Louisiana National Guard was there, and they weren't just going to let people out because there was nowhere for them to go. And with no creature comforts, there was no electricity, no air conditioning, no running water, no sewer. Those things were all severely damaged.
Katrina displaced hundreds of thousands. Some left the New Orleans area, some relocating to our valley, realizing the devastation was just too much.
New Orleanians are a proud people, and they wanted to take care of themselves, but they knew that they couldn't do this alone. And so we saw people from all over the country reach out and help the community. But, you know, as we did have people who stayed here in New Orleans, but a lot of people left. They did evacuate, and they did go to the far reaches of the United States.
20 years later, the storm is still vivid to those who lived through it and covered it in real time.
Didn't do highly produced television, but really just kind of did a lot of show and tell, because that's what people wanted to know. They wanted to see, what does my neighborhood look like? What does my street look like? Is my house still there? Is my neighborhood still there? And that's what we did in a lot of the early days.
Ed stayed in New Orleans for a year after Katrina, documenting not just the destruction, but the resilience.
It was the toughest story to cover because of the length of time and how many days that we did stories that were related to it. You know, this was my community too. I didn't just work here. This is where I lived. This was the city that I fell in love with.